period here. We will reconvene the PDC board meeting. And we did things way out of the usual order today, including the consent agenda, which is next and was modified. Commissioners, Gina gave you a revised agenda here just as you got to the meeting. There are three items. The new item is Resolution 7066, an action item amending bylaws of the Portland Development Commission regarding the filling of vacancies in the Portland Development Commission Board of Commissioners and election of officers. That came about at the last minute because in a review of the existing bylaws, there isn't much flexibility. It calls for an election in July, and we're not even having a meeting in July. It calls for an election by ballot. We don't need to do it by ballot. And so we also took the opportunity, and this was the staff's idea, and I think it's a great idea to actually go from chairman, secretary, acting secretary to titles of chairman, vice chair, and secretary. So that's what that item is. The second consent item, Resolution 7060, authorizing execution of fiscal year 2014-15 intergovernmental service level agreement, general fund special appropriations with the City of Portland to provide funding of $5,425,564 for implementing economic development activities on a citywide basis. That's simply the IGA by which we receive the general funds for this year's budget. And finally, Resolution 7061, authorizing short-term interfund operation loans not to exceed $1 million from specified funds to the Community Development Block Grant Economic Opportunity Initiative Fund from July 1, 2014 to June 30, 2015, and that's an annual motion. So I would look for a motion to approve Resolution 7066, 7060, and 7061.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Back to the regular agenda. Action item Resolution 7062, adopting budget amendment number 3 for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2013 and ending June 30, 2014 and making appropriations. So this is closing the book on this year, since we're still in the 2013-14 fiscal year. Tony?
Good afternoon, Chair Andrews, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinn. I'm Tony Barnes, Budget Officer, and I'm presenting Resolution 7062, which is the final budget amendment for this fiscal year. It's doing a couple things for the current year budget. It's truing up where we've already moved some budget items into next fiscal year, so we have some decreases, but we also have a couple increases for specific projects that I want to address. Summary level here, under the administration appropriations, we're increasing it by $357,000 for the initial costs related to the implementation of the new enterprise resource planning system. That's the purchase of the software that's occurring in June. Whereas the rest of the implementation will be next fiscal year, and you'll see that as part of the recommended changes for the budget adoption. For housing, we're decreasing it by $5.3 million to line up the budget with PHB, the Portland Housing Bureau's budget for this fiscal year. These funds were already moved into the 14-15 PDC approved budget, so it's just making sure both budgets are in alignment. Infrastructure, we're increasing the budget for Dawson Park this fiscal year by $700,000, and that's merely to consolidate the budget in one fiscal year. We had a budget that spanned the end of last fiscal year, this fiscal year, and into next fiscal year, and it was recognized that most of the bills on that project would be paid this fiscal year. So we're going to be amending it to make sure that there's no over expenditures this fiscal year on that specific project. And then finally, on the property redevelopment category, we're decreasing a net $203,000 across multiple URAs, mainly in the interstate urban renewal area where we're using current year cash to help in appropriations to fund that current year increase in infrastructure for Dawson Park. Some of those categories that are decreasing include some property management and some property improvements as well as project development dollars in interstate. That's not needed. Some of those dollars are already in next fiscal year, will be utilized in next fiscal year, so it's merely truing up the budget. So in total, we're decreasing total expenditures by a total of $4.5 million. You can see that $5 million change related to housing, the increase related to administration for the ERP, and the $700,000 in infrastructure for Dawson Park. In total, the budget's going to be amended to $120.9 million, and with a contingency of $135.7. A reminder on the contingency, it's mainly bond proceeds from prior fiscal years that are being reserved for projects in next year's budget as well as future year budgets. So projects like the VMC and Convention Center Hotel would be utilizing some of that contingency in later years' forecasts. And just a quick summary of the final budget for this fiscal year, the $129 million, that doesn't include the contingency. The breakout is about $15.2 million for administration, and we'll compare that to the adopted budget chart when we look at that during the next agenda item, which is 13% of the budget. Business development is 18.5, and property redevelopment is 60.2 million, still 50% of the budget. The property redevelopment budget includes $27 million still for the Multnomah County Health Building. As discussed during the TSCC hearing, only $10 million of the $27 million will be dispersed this fiscal year, I think tomorrow. And then the balance will need to roll over into next fiscal year, probably in the first budget amendment in the fall, I anticipate, when we're closer along to the county going forward on that project. Housing, you can see, is only 12% or $14.5 million. That represents a lot of resources that were already moved from this fiscal year into next fiscal year. That's going to be represented in the adoption of the budget, as well as the PHP contract item as well, where there's a $44 million budget next year. So there's a lot of things underway, just not finishing up this year. On the resource side, not a whole lot of changes. Just a few items we're truing up as far as intergovernmental revenues, the match up to the city budget, as well as some property income assumptions. Total revenues this fiscal year are forecast to be about $120 million in total. And again, this is the breakdown of resources. $256 million in total when you add the balance, what was from prior fiscal years. But this year we received $59 million in short-term debt. That's the second biggest category, short-term tax increment resources. And we have no issuance of long-term debt this fiscal year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the budget revision.
I don't have any questions. I think it's interesting to see, just from a timing standpoint, the relative small expenditure on housing this year. It's get pushed into next year. Commissioner Mullis, any questions? Commissioner Dixon?
No, thanks.
Commissioner Kelly?
How long will it be before we have to look at another budget issue?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
No question.
All right, I would look for a motion to approve Resolution 7062, adopting budget amendment number 3 for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2013 and ending June 30, 2014, and making appropriations.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we go on to adopting the budget for our next fiscal year. And surprise, it's Tony Barnes.
Happy
Good
New Year.
afternoon again.
Happy New Year.
So the 14-15 approved PDC budget has been officially certified by the TSCC following the hearing. And I'm going to present to the board the final changes that are being recommended for adoption of the budget this afternoon. This follows upon the June 4th briefing that was provided by Kimberly Branham and Faye Brown regarding recommended changes, what came out of City Council with the budget approval in May. And so the changes that are incorporated here, the recommended changes, all of them were discussed during that budget presentation in the beginning of June. Excuse me. I'm going to start out with resources this time, just to show the changes there first. We made some changes to the beginning fund balance and property income assumptions. Mainly property income, we've reclassified some revenues that were classified as reimbursements. So that's the decrease you can see in reimbursements. It's just moving or reclassifying their property income. The increase in property income is just mainly updating our estimates from third-party managed properties that we have, things like Station Place, parking, garage, Union Station, in a convention center. We did some final estimates from the companies and incorporated those into the budget. So the net change in resource is about $1.6 million. We have a total resource budget of $246 million. That includes that beginning fund balance of $136 million from all the prior TIF proceeds and other revenue sources that are being held in reserve. So much like the prior budget we just looked at, beginning fund balance is the bulk of the resource. And then again, second largest resource is short-term debt, 22%, $50 million. You'll see that's a little bit less than what we had last year. And the reason behind that are the URA modification proposals that are going forward that City Council took action on, where there's a reduction in River District as well as Waiyura, Willamette Industrial URA. Those resources are being taken out of the forecast for next fiscal year, and therefore we have less TIF resources in the short-term debt category. We have a small amount in long-term debt that's being recommended, about $15 million. As we get into the fiscal year, as we go through the revisions, as we see project progress, we'll determine the need on whether or not we actually need those resources and need to issue that long-term debt. And then the other categories, loan collections and property income, the latest estimates based on what we know as far as the portfolio and our properties as far as property income. 9.7 in property income, 11.1 in loan collections. The intergovernmental revenues, 9.5, that's made up of our city general fund. That was part of the prior consent agenda, as well as our federal resources for the Advanced Manufacturing Grant and Community Development Block Grant for the UI program. So our recommended expenditure changes are summarized here. We went back and looked at the staffing estimates, and as you can see here, there's not a big change overall. And I want to emphasize, while this is called the personal service budget, it actually includes some long-term liabilities for PERS. So it's above and beyond the cost of the 95 positions here at PDC. But you can see there's just a slight reduction between the City Council approved budget and the adopted budget, about $35,000 or so. That's going forward here. Most of the changes, we're reallocating project costs, how staff are allocated to different projects across the agency. Managers took one last look at how they allocate staff. We are including a Central City 2035 budget for West and Southeast Quadrant work. That totals $186,000 in River District, Central East Side, and North Macadam. As I mentioned, on the revenue side, there's PDC's final estimates for third-party property management. It's a total operating expense of $2.7 million, net operating income of $1.4 million for those properties. And again, that includes Station Place Garage, Union Station, in a convention center, and several other smaller properties. And finally, the Enterprise Resource Planning Project, we're adding $760,000 into next year's budget. This is under the administration category. This includes the contract with Tyler Technologies for implementing the project, as well as $123,000 for temporary services and other staff to backfill project staff. And this relates to the last-minute amendment that was made to the board documents where we included that backfill cost that was not included in the original draft last week. This amount, though, was included in the June 4th presentation as a total package of what we're going to recommend to add to the budget. So in total, we're increasing expenditures from the budget approved by City Council by $1.2 million, mainly due to the items I just mentioned. And that leaves us with $190 million budget for next year for expenditures. Most of the expenditures categorized as property redevelopment, 50% again. Most of that's made up of $20 million for the VMC project, $36 million between River District and Downtown Waterfront for Old Town Chinatown and PNCA projects, and $7 million in commercial property redevelopment across the neighborhood URAs. That's what makes up the bulk of the $94 million. In business development, there's an $8 million loan for Daimler included in there. That's scheduled to go out next fiscal year, at the start of the fiscal year. But our administration number is $13.2 million, 7% of the expenditure budget. So that's compared to, what was it, 15.5 or so that was in the last revision for this year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the current year, the next year's budget.
I don't have any, just there was one minor change versus what we had been briefed on, so I'm good. Commissioner Kelly?
I'm good.
Commissioner Mullis?
Nice job, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dixon?
Looks good, thanks, Tony.
Well, before we approve this, I think we do need to thank staff again one more time for leading us through this torturous path of discussions, hearings, budget meetings, and corrections and recorrections. It's a very, very complex budget. I mean, I have an MBA in finance. I'm not patting myself on my back, but I'm telling you, it took me at least 2 years to come close to understanding it. So when we have the folks that were just in front of us approving it, saying that you guys do a great job in terms of being very clear and responding in a immediate manner, it makes us up here very happy. So thank you, Faye. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for all of the people who are working behind you as well. So I will look for a motion to approve Resolution 7063, adopting the annual budget of the Portland Development Commission for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2014, ending June 30, 2015, and making appropriations.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And our last item having to do with the budget today.
Surprise, surprise.
Resolution 7064, authorizing intergovernmental agreements with the Portland Housing Bureau to provide housing programs and support services to the Portland Housing Bureau. Tony!
So this is the, I think, the fifth IGA, Intergovernmental Agreement, going forward with the Portland Housing Bureau for fiscal year 14-15. So this resolution includes two IGAs, two contracts with the Bureau. One for a delivery of housing redevelopment finance projects. Basically, it's the TIF set aside, the housing set aside, the 30% set aside for 14-15. And the second contract is the housing support services, where instead of PDC paying and reimbursing PHB for project expenditures, PHB is reimbursing PDC to support things like property management, IT support, and construction environmental service support on a variety of projects. Over time, that service amount has gone down over the last few years. The total contract's much smaller than it was several years ago, but there's certain areas where it makes sense for PHB to continue contracting with PDC for those services. The housing rehabilitation and finance contract total is $44.8 million. As you can see, this is Exhibit C from the draft contract that's included in your packets. It includes $41 million in capital dollars and financial assistance to implement the affordable housing, multifamily housing projects, home rehab, and home buyer programs across 10 urban renewal areas. You can see the bulk of the resources are in Convention Center, URA. There's a project starting to move forward there. There's also dollars in River District, $17 million for a project that's underway, and project dollars across the urban renewal areas in the neighborhoods. There's $3.6 million in staffing support. So just like PDC, PHB allocates staff to specific projects and programs to implement them. And the 3.6 represents what they have to implement the $41 million in financing. So the total approved contract would be $44.8 million. And how this relates to the overall set-aside policy, this is a big table. There's a lot of numbers up here, but this summarizes in detail and in summary the overall set-aside progress and forecast. Might be kind of hard to see, but it has each URA with the targets and what the actual cumulative expenditures have been for this last fiscal year and what the forecast is through 18-19. So some URAs have less than a 30% target, some more. You can see the bottom line, the actuals for 12-13 was about 33%. That's a cumulative number. So since the start of the set-aside in 2006, there's been, well, counting this fiscal year's budget, $218 million in housing expenditures and 679 in total expenditures that are part of that set-aside basis across the urban renewal areas. As you can see, going into the forecast, that number grows to $343 million in 18-19 and $1 billion in total URA expenditures that it's measured against, about 34% housing. And what that includes right now is the $20 million as well that was moved into housing from the interstate urban renewal area through the budget process last few months. That number would have been closer to 30% without it. So it's a cumulative number, and it's also looking forward, adjusted for the future TIF forecast and what projects and programs are estimated by PHB and PDC kind of moving together. So I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the contracts or.
A couple comments from me. First, it's been interesting to see how the Portland Housing Bureau has sort of staffed up and reduced the amount of services that we provide on an annual basis. I think it started off at about $250,000 and it's $70,000 at this point. And I don't know, I'm sensing that that it's a matter of scale. In some cases, we'll probably always be providing some services for them for like property management, because it just doesn't make sense to have a property management section for as little that they have to do, but that's just an observation. The other one is for commissioners going on, this chart right here is a very important chart to keep track of and to know about, because we get questions all of the time in terms of why this year's budget doesn't show 30% going to housing. So this is a great way to show that we have met our targets, we have met it over time, and we are poised to meet the target in the future. Questions or comments, Commissioner Wallace?
No, I'd just say thanks again, Tony, to you and Faye and the entire staff. A lot of the people that did a lot of work of this aren't in the room, but I think they need to know we greatly appreciate all the efforts that they put in getting us to this point. Thanks.
Commissioner Dixon?
This chart is really great. It's hard to see from there, but when we have it in front of us, it makes a lot of sense. I was wondering if a particular year had a set aside that was lower, but then it was made up in the next year. Does that meet the target or not?
Yeah, everything we put into the budget and forecast is based off of this rolling total. So we recognize if something doesn't happen in one fiscal year, we'll have to build that into the forecast. Basically, it's based on timing of expenditures. So sometimes things are delayed.
Sure.
And therefore the target might not be met as a result. So it could be met in the following fiscal year or 2 years down the road based on the timing of when that project happens. So
for instance, we know for a fact that we hit the target of 33% this year, but if next year it was 29, we still would would we still match the target since we had the extra 3?
It would trigger us to look at how to reprogram the future year
Okay.
budgets, working together with PHB.
Okay, thanks a lot. And yes, wonderful work. And like I said earlier, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly.
I just have a question after being exposed to this TSCC process. Does the Housing Bureau go through the same review?
As part of the City of Portland budget process, as a bureau within the City of Portland.
I mean, this all just feels to me as a new guy, like, we're passing off on a huge amount of money that we have a fiduciary responsibility for, but really not much oversight, if any, at ourselves.
Yeah, the process, it's a reimbursement process. So we enter into this $44 million contract, and they certify that the expenditures, when they make the expenditures and send them to us for review, are TIF eligible. And we review the contract, the invoices, and then, sometimes we ask some questions, but we'll reimburse them for those expenditures.
That's why it's an IGA with the Housing Bureau that covers how they spend the money, not just that we send them the money. And if we fund a sidewalk project, or if we fund a light rail, it's all through IGAs. And even though the dollar amounts aren't as big on a regular basis, it's all the same mechanism. We still have responsibility for those dollars, and it's all documented through the same procedure.
That's all I have.
Okay, then I would look for a motion to approve Resolution 7064, authorizing intergovernmental agreements with the Portland Housing Bureau to provide housing programs and support services to the Portland Housing Bureau.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
I'm going to miss you next year.
Miss you too.
You can always attend the meetings as a guest, just to make sure you're keeping track of the budget process.
Oh, I'll watch it on TV at home.
Oh, man.
Okay, the next item are the meeting minutes. They are for the meeting of March 19th, 2014, the PDC-PSC joint work session. And I can make a quick comment here. We have been kind of careful over the last few years we keep pushing minutes off for approval because we don't have 3 people who are at the meeting who can approve them. A look at the statute by our legal staff says you're actually, even if you were not at the meeting, unless there is something that's in the meeting that's incorrect, you're actually expected to vote aye, so that the organization can keep up to date in terms of the minutes. It's not exactly a controversial item usually, but you learn something new every
I
day.
know, that's impressive.
So I would look for a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 19th, 2014, the joint work session, PDC-PSC.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, on to the exciting election of officers. This should take a long time. Always does. Commissioner Mullis, I think you wanted to kick off this.
Yes, thanks, Chair Andrews. I'd like to nominate Tom Kelly to be chair for the next year for the Portland Development Commission.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Well,
And can I speak to it just
yes,
briefly?
absolutely.
I think he and his family have shown great dedication to this city by having a contracting business located in North Portland for decades. A lot of folks have moved out, but they've stayed there and invested there and hired a lot of people and got a lot of paychecks out the door. And so I think he's got a great commitment to the city and brings a great set of skills to the table and will be a good chair. I've really enjoyed working with you, and I look forward to working with him.
Thank you. And I agree. Actually, Tom and I, over about the last year and a half, ran into each other in several different kind of venues and had a chance to chat. And I've always been impressed with the name of his firm and the reputation of Tom and or Mr. Kelly, Commissioner Kelly, and his firm. And as we were looking for replacements, and I looked at the list of possibilities, he was very close to the very, very top. East Side guy, much committed to the equity piece that we are so committed to, and well respected by just a wide range of people in the community. And I also thank you for, I having had done it for 5 years, you realize what you're taking on here, and
I think so.
okay. All right, all those in favor of Tom Kelly becoming chair of PDC, aye?
Hi.
Aye, opposed? And I would like to make a motion to elect Commissioner Dixon as vice chair and Commissioner Molis as secretary.
Second.
Any discussion? Other than thank you guys for your continued service. John, you in particular, I mean, 6 years for me is, I know that's remarkable, but I think you're going on 9 as a commissioner.
8.
8, and coming up on 9. And I mean, I've enjoyed working with you guys so much, but you in particular have been able to bring so much to the organization from your knowledge of the labor industry and helping with the apprenticeship programs, absolutely phenomenal.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, all those in favor of Commissioner Dixon as vice chair and Commissioner Molis as secretary, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? There you go.
And I would just make the comment that, you know, Commissioner Wilhoit's not here, which usually means you automatically get elected to something. So kind of missed an opportunity.
We did miss an opportunity, didn't we?
You want to make something up? Okay, the next item I shouldn't even discuss, but it's time certain at 3:10, so we're going to go on a short break here and let the festivities begin. Congratulations, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, sir.